It's hard to imagine living in a world not surrounded by water. It's been said that you're no further than 6 miles away from any body of water standing anywhere in the state of Michigan. In fact, you may have been canoeing down River Raisin, visited the beaches of Lake Erie in Sterling State Park, or gone out on Lake Erie perch or walleye fishing, all without leaving Monroe County. As you may have learned, Michigan is a peninsula, meaning we're surrounded by the Great Lakes. Our Great Lakes are made up of Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, and our very own Lake Erie. Those Great Lakes make up over 20% of our world's surface freshwater and over 90% of the United States' surface freshwater. So with so much freshwater surrounding us here in Michigan, where's the rest? If we take all of the world's water, it's best to separate it out into two categories. The largest category is saltwater, found in marine ecosystems. Saltwater makes up over 97% of all of the water we have here on Earth. That saltwater is the water that fills in our oceans and our seas. The second category is freshwater. Freshwater, meaning it has no salt or very little salt, makes up only 2.5% of all of the water we have here on Earth. So where do we find that fresh water? Out of all of our fresh water, 68.7% of it is locked away in glaciers and ice caps, meaning that it's frozen or in its solid state. If you know about water, you know that it takes really cold temperatures to freeze water. So in order to find those glaciers and ice caps, we'd have to travel to the North or the South Pole. 30.1% of our fresh water is found underground. And if you're like me and you have a well, you rely on that fresh water for drinking, cooking, and even bathing. So after all of our frozen fresh water and our fresh water found underground, we only have 1.5% of our fresh water remaining at the surface. That surface fresh water is what fills in our lakes and our ponds, our rivers, our wetlands. It's what's found inside of plants, inside of animals, including us, and it can be found inside our atmosphere, our air. When we talk about humidity, we're referring to how much water or moisture is in the air. And the last location that we can find surface fresh water is in our soil. If we travel to some of those cooler locations, we'll see that sometimes that water inside the soil is frozen, in which we refer to it as permafrost. So where do we have fresh water in Monroe County? Let's head outside and see. Flowing water is water that starts at one point and moves to another. It includes rivers, streams, creeks, channels, and brooks. Sometimes that water can be really deep and wide. Other times it's going to be quite shallow and so narrow you can step right over top of it. Here in Monroe County, we have River Raisin, South Otter Creek, and Plum Creek, just to name a few. At the Knabusch Math and Science Center, we have our channel that goes along all of our trail systems. That channel is fed by La Pleasance Creek and it runs all the way out into Lake Erie. Water in a flowing water ecosystem can either move very rapidly or it can move quite slowly. We do know, though, that the animals that live there have to be well adapted to those speeds. Plants need to have strong roots to hold them in place, and animals need to be able to either swim really well or have the ability to hold on. So the question is, if the water isn't flowing, what do we call it? Standing water. Standing water doesn't mean that the water is completely still, but it is fully contained and moved primarily by the wind or the turning over effect. The turning over effect occurs when water at the top cools, like what's going to be happening soon in the fall. That cool water then sinks to the bottom, causing that water to move upward. When we talk about standing water, we need to split it up into two categories. Those categories are based on whether or not all of the water is within the photic zone. The photic zone is the area of the water that sunlight can reach. In a pond, they're quite shallow, so all of their water is within the photic zone, meaning sunlight can reach all the way to the bottom, and they tend to have lots of plants. Lakes, on the other hand, are much deeper and have water that is not fully contained within that photic zone and have some areas of darkness. When we think about the Great Lakes, Lake Erie is actually the shallowest of all of the lakes. And even though it's the shallowest, it can still get to be about 210 feet deep. Although the areas near us here in Monroe County reach only about 30 feet deep. However, if we were in Lake Superior, we could be in water that was 1,333 feet deep. It would definitely be dark down there. Here at the Math and Science Center, we have a pond. So our pond is only about 12 feet deep, so we are fully within that photic zone, and sunlight can reach all the way to the bottom, meaning we have lots of plants. We also have lots of animals that like to make this ecosystem their home, including schools of bluegill, largemouth bass, mallard and wood ducks. We have beavers and muskrats and so many more. But as cool as this ecosystem here is, we've got another one connected to it that I think is even cooler. Come with me. We are standing here in our swamp. Swamps belong to a group of freshwater ecosystems called wetlands. To be a wetland, that means that you have to be covered with water either permanently or seasonally. In Michigan, we have 3 different kinds of wetlands. We have swamps, marshes, and bogs. And while we don't have any bogs here at the Knabusch Math and Science Center, they are one of my favorites. A bog is essentially a pond that's been covered with peat and moss. That peat and moss layer can be really thick or fairly thin. But if you were in a bog and you walked across it and you jumped, you would feel that water slosh underneath you. That water also tends to be acidic in nature, so they can have some really interesting plants grow there. A marsh is a flooded grassland, and a swamp is a flooded forest. So here in our swamp, you see lots of trees. And when those trees die, they make really great places for our animals to utilize. For example, our tree swallows will live in one of those trees. We might have a woodpecker find its food in it. An eagle might land in it to look for fish or frogs to eat. And if that tree falls in the water, it's a great place for our turtles to stand on and bask in the sun. While Michigan only takes up a small amount of land here on Earth, I think it's safe to say that it's pretty cool what its freshwaters can provide us.